Okay.
Feel like
There it is.
Okay.
Of what I hope to be many homeschool connection nights. I'm working my graduate, and one of the research projects that I'm doing is about the parent involvement. Doing on literature, different articles they've done. Numerous studies have found that the parent involvement is really the big chunk that's going to really help in reading achievement and both in math achievement. There's a number of studies that I have been reading that said parent, just something simple as reading in front of your child. You don't need to see, have a love for reading. So that's something that could be like a big book, even just reading a newspaper, anything that they see you're reading, that's going to make them feel that, oh, we're reading something that's. So I really appreciate you coming, and a week, an hour is always hard to find. So I really appreciate it, and I hope this is going to turn into a regular thing. So the things we're going to do, finding main idea. There's a number of we work on in reading. I just decided to pick these three. Main idea is a very difficult skill for the students, and we'll talk about exactly why. Sequencing, a lot of those can be chalked up to silly mistakes, and inferencing, that is one that the students are either really, really good at or really, really hard at. It's very hard to teach inference on background knowledge.
I'm not familiar with the word.
We're going to go through it all. What it all is. Can you get back to the computer and press the arrows, please? I thought it was going to work. Oh, and for those of you watching online, you can download this on my website if you can't see this very well. All right, so again, thank you for coming. This works in guide. Main purpose is those reading quizzes that the students can always fix up for extra points. This is going to really help you to understand why they made mistakes, how to avoid them from making those mistakes in the future when they're taking the reading quizzes, and also just hopefully they're going to be able to start recognizing their mistakes. Feel free to take notes. You can take it right on the little packets. Those packets are yours to keep. And like I said, the presentation is now available on my website, and I made sure that the Google sharing things. I know one time you had it downloaded something from my site and it was private, so I fixed it. So hopefully you should be able to see it. And we're going to be going around. If you have a specific question about reading, appreciate it if you'd send me an email later, or if we have a couple minutes at the end, I can talk to you one-on-one. But this is going to be more of a generalized kind of thing for reading. All right, so the first thing we're going to be talking about tonight, and it is very tricky for students because it really requires them to think about the overall thing in the passage. A lot of the times they will pick up on one specific thing, like if the passage dogs and the first paragraph is about what they like to play, and then the second one is about what they like to eat, and the third one is how you should care for the dog. Some students might say that the main idea is what to do to take care of a dog. Some might say what a dog eats, when overall it's about the dog. They have a very hard time cluing in on the overall idea versus details. Picking out specific details, they're very good at doing that. Overall, big picture is not the greatest thing. Some of the common mistakes they say is they don't reread the section. I always tell them if it is blah, 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 blah. First thing they're supposed to do is go back and reread paragraph 4. Even if they're supposed to read every passage twice, but I always tell them they need to read it again. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. When we're taking reading quizzes now, I can always kind of go up behind them and be like, did you reread that paragraph? And they'll be like, oh, let me go do that. When it comes time for the SOLs, I can't do that. I can't say anything to them, so they have to get in the habit of doing that now. Like I said, another common mistake is focusing on the small detail and not thinking of the overall. And some students will sometimes find a detail in a section and think that is the answer. And the SOL and all sorts of reading quizzes will in the passage specifically to throw them off. I don't agree with that. It's the nature of the beast. It's what we're going to see, but that's what it's going to be. So they always have to ask themselves, what is this part mostly about? They have to ask themselves for every choice that they can possibly get, and whichever one fits the mostly what it's mainly about is what they need to do. And if, like I said, if the chosen answer, so going back to that dog example, if the one says that this mainly is about what dogs eat, they read paragraph 1, see, there wasn't really anything about food. Paragraph 2, yeah, was about food, but paragraph 3 was about food. That should clue them in that that's not what the main idea of paragraph 2? Yes, but not the whole passage. All right, so there are a number of different ways that they're going to word main ideas on a test. The first one is the most basic one. What is the main idea of paragraph or the whole passage? So that's pretty cut and dry. What's the main idea? The next one is which paragraph is about so on and so forth. That's kind of the reverse of the first one. First one, it gives them a paragraph to look at, and they have to find the main idea. The second one, they give them the main idea. They have to figure out which paragraph goes with that. The third one is kind of similar to the first one, just worded in a different way, and it's what is paragraph X or the whole passage mostly about. Basically, these are clue words that they need to clue in to understand that they're going to be a main idea question. Another way, that they might say it is what is the most important thing about this paragraph passage, just another way to ask for the main idea. They're just going to ask for main idea in a number of different ways. And then the final one, which they don't see as often, but they will see it, and they do see it a lot on the reading quizzes that I create. What is the best title for the paragraph and passage? So that is, a title basically is the main idea of the section. And that's one that they really struggle on, especially because, again, they pick up on one thing. And we're going to go through one specific example where I will show you exactly how when I make the test, I kind of think of how the SOL is going to make, and then I go through that. So all right, so these are some examples. What I've done here is, this is a bunch of different questions, and these numbers here, these are the students all take their tests in bubble sheets, as I'm sure you're aware. The reason I do that is because I can, and it'll break it down for me exactly. So I know on this one, it's mainly story mainly about. I know 29% of the class chose A, 5% chose B, 67 chose C, no one chose D. Luckily, because there was only one thing about D. Same thing over here. Most important point of the passage fact. 0% got that one. 35 and 15. Got that. So we see overall 24% got that, 10% got that, 52 got it correct, 14 got it wrong. Over here, 20% got that one, 10%, 30%, 35. So looking at these numbers, we can tell that this is a skill that struggles with. I mean, more students, aside from this one and very slightly that one, more students are picking the incorrect answer than the correct answer. All right, so this one is kind of hard to, not from me. No.
You knew it was going to be a challenge.
Yeah, all right, so I'll read it. Well, yeah, I'll read it.
I can help you too, since I'm right here in front of you.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. James Madison was the 4th President of the United States. He is best known as the father of the Constitution for his leading role in shaping the document. Madison designed the Constitution system of checks and balances at the Constitutional Convention of 1787. The system balances the power between Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court. It gives each branch some control over the actions of the others. This way, one branch of government can't become too powerful. Madison also helped create the U.S. federal system. This system divides power between the central government and the states. Most importantly, he drafted the first Constitution. The amendments are called the Bill of Rights. Like his predecessor, Thomas Jefferson, Madison was a Virginia man. He served as Secretary of State under President Jefferson. During this time, Madison worked extra hard to keep America out of wars that were happening all over Europe. In 1812, however, Madison led America into a war with Great Britain. Great Britain was interfering with American trading ships. They were also becoming allies with Native Americans and the British Americans to attack Americans. Madison realized that his nation needed to fight back, even though they were unprepared. At one point in the War of 1812, British troops captured Washington, D.C. They destroyed the White House and other government buildings. But their success was only temporary. America won when General Andrew Jackson defeated the British in the South. The British invasion caused Madison and his wife Dolly to flee Washington, D.C. Dolly was famous for throwing lavish parties that the British didn't stop her. She continued her presidential entertaining from a new Washington home. Madison served on his second built. The war had brought in. Americans were more united. The economy was growing. Madison left office in 18 for his estate in Virginia.
Very good. And could you read your question?
So it says, what is the main idea of this passage?
So that's asking what the whole passage is about. So this is one that's all in general.
So choice A, Madison was a president who helped.
And 57% of the class chose that one. I wrote this question myself, and I wrote it specifically in this direction. Is the main idea, that's the main idea of paragraph. Was they rewrote, they said president, constitution, somewhere in there, and shows that. So the second answer,
Choice B, and help strong nation.
which ends up being the correct answer. We're talking about a constitution. Here it is, Secretary of State and War of 1812, War of 1812, and basically he built a strong nation. And then choice C was, it was just about the War of 1812, and specific details, and we see 14% of the class did go for that one, because in here, it talks about the War of 1812, and it had something to do with it. And those they knew was about Dolly Madison, that the title of this passage was James Madison, so the main idea was not going to be about Dolly Madison.
Although I would have chosen the one. I'm just saying.
There. Or Thanksgiving, and I mean that shows that the students are very specific things. First paragraph, not looking at it overall. This question I forgot to include the breakdown on this, but they did very well on this. It said which paragraphs discusses his wife and his interests. That's the reverse one. It gives you the main paragraph. They, if I would have included, they did very well on this because I saw Perry's talking about Dolly Madison. So they did specific details, but overall, I mean, over half the class, when you had that, a third of the class got that correct because they either looked at just the first paragraph and chose it, or did skim through it, saw War of 1812 and specific that, rather than looked at the next one. Yeah, this one's a little bit better. Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence. It took him a little bit more than 2 weeks. Although he was old, Jefferson eloquently wrote why the colonists did not want to desert. Britain was denying the colonists rights. Independence clarified the values of colonists. The war was not just about taxes. It was about freedom. It was about the relationship of any government of its people. Finally, the war was about the responsibility of government of the people. So this is just one paragraph out of a larger. The question said, which sentence is the best summary of paragraph 4? So obviously, go back to paragraph. Well, hopefully they would have gone back to paragraph 4 and looked at it. And we see the first choice, which again, don't tell your students this, but when I'm developing my own questions, I normally put a good, bad answer as our choice because it's an exercise to tell them they need to read all 4 choices. So 62% of the class chose that Jefferson was 33 years old when he wrote the Declaration. 33 sentences thought that was the main idea. Second one, the colonists did not want Great Britain to rule them any longer. That was the main idea of the paragraph that had preceded this. It was all about why the colonists. The actual correct answer, which Jefferson was a skilled writer who wrote many reasons why America wanted freedom in the Declaration. We talk about taxes, values, relationship with government, so many reasons why. Only 14% of the class answer. Again, going back to those reasons. For B or for A, they chose the first thing they saw. B, they probably. And then the last one, I threw that one in because those are social studies. Patrick Henry, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson contributed to building America. That is true. That's what we had been learning about in social studies at the time. This passage itself tells me is the student remembered that from class, which is good because they remembered social studies stuff. That's what help them learn social studies as well. And picked that. But 5% works out to be about 1 student. So overall, a big concerning on the first thing or not reading. This is a happy thing because this is one we took a couple passages from that same Thomas Jefferson passage took last week. So looking at that first, we saw 52% of the class time, and last week 85% of that. This is something we've been working on a lot in guided reading, retitling pages, retitling books, just retitling paragraphs. Working on it has a huge gap, specifically in this whole idea. So this one, basically, I'm not going to read the passage. The best heading of paragraph 3, I'm going to tell you how I came up with it. Battles of Lexington and Concord, it says, Battles of Lexington and Concord. So we see 29% of the class pick up. Did they ask themselves, was it all about the Battle of Lexington and Concord? If it was, it would have talked probably about the casualties, the weapons used, what started that. But it just, if the only thing it talked about was that the reason they had the meeting was because of Lexington and Concord. Meeting in Philadelphia, the one thing, a lot of the times I use different words. Well, it says Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia. I changed Second Continental Congress into meeting, but there was a meeting, and that's what Continental Army. They talk about the Continental Army here, but only, I mean, that's all they mention it. And our leader, Washington, they talk about it there. So, by and large, a lot of people saw, a lot of the students of Lexington, Concord, or Continental Army picked up on the small details, or thrown off by the fact that I use meeting in Philadelphia. And that's something the SOL is going to do, is use different words. The second one, they did much better here. Like I said, this was last Friday's. Great Britain's loss, while it does talk about Great Britain losing, that was in the prior section. So about one student looked in the prior section. Mount Vernon, they clued on that said Mount Vernon there, and sacrifices at Valley Forge, which was what basically the whole passage overall was about. And our strong leader, which wasn't, it says strong there, but it doesn't necessarily, and it does say leader, but they would have. So this is showing that they are getting better at main idea. All right, so those are cool statistics, but those are some statistics to look at. But this is how you can improve this with your child. When you're reading with your child, it doesn't matter fiction, nonfiction, newspaper article, anything you're reading with your child. At a natural stopping sound, what was the main idea or the most important thing in that page, that chapter, that section? If they're on the ball, great. If not, we'll talk about how to fix that. You can also ask them to retitle that page or retitle that chapter. That's going to be really helpful on chapter books, fiction chapter books, because a lot of the times, especially fourth grade chapter books, have kind of generic titles. They can make them all different and a little bit more interesting. For instance, in guided reading today, the one group I was working with, they had a nonfiction book, and each one talked about different stops that a vet made. And I said to be, rather than saying stop 1, stop 2, stop 3, they talked about what was happening at each stop. So that made it a little bit interesting, gives a little bit more main idea. It was mostly about that being really good for a magazine, newspaper, anything really. So if they pick up on the small details, what you should do is open up to that page and point out, oh, it's only about this much. It's about that. That leaves this much not about that. And then help them to find the main idea. Model exactly how you find that main idea. Ask yourself, well, is it mainly about that? Or I see a lot of stuff about this. What's another way we could say that? And then you always need to encourage them to reread if they get something wrong. That's going to be the only way that they're going to learn to correct their mistakes, and that's the only way that they're going to further ingrain themselves that they need to be rereading things if they're not completely correct. So now we're going to switch gears, and we're going to talk about understanding sequence. Understanding sequence is much easier than main idea as long as the students are reading carefully. Basically, understanding sequence is just understanding the events of the events of the things happen in order. There's a lot of clue words that help out with sequence: before, beginning, end, after, next, then, last, finally, first, second, third, times on the clock, days of the week, months, and years. That's not a whole list, but those are the most common ones that they're going to see. Time on clock is really helpful because if something happened at 8 o'clock, it obviously happened before 11 o'clock. Days of the week, obviously Monday through so on and so forth. A lot of the times, they might not have those clue words. They just have to kind of think about the beginning, the middle, and the end of the actual passage, which that's just kind of thinking about the plot structure, and that kind of helps put it in perspective. A lot of the common mistakes, again, is looking back in the story to find out. A lot of the SOL questions ask very specific things about the sequence that you can't really, unless you understood that passage right off the bat, you have to look back. I mean, a lot of times when I'm teaching small guided reading groups, the little thing will ask a sequence question about they were playing a game, who went first or who went after so-and-so. I have to look back to find myself because I lost my answer key, and so I have to make up the answer key as I'm going. A lot of the students will try to just kind of guess, and I'll tell them, I had to look back to find this. You need to look back. Not paying attention to the times of what they mess up on is they don't look at before or after. And we're going to see an example when they just didn't attend to the before or after. And the other thing that's going to be huge is attending to immediately before or immediately after. Immediately, that means like something happened, or the event that they described in question, and what happened right before that. Because a lot of times they'll say immediately before. So for instance, like before I came here, I was setting up the webcam, and I had to immediately before starting the meeting, I set up the webcam. Before, yeah, I did eat dinner, but they want what's immediately before. While technically speaking, I ate dinner is correct, they want immediately before. That's something that really screws up a lot of students. Next one. All right, so how are these questions going to be worded on a test? One very common way is going to be sequence. I just put this blank example in which it's going to give 4 different bodies. There's no real set number. And in this specific example, they have to take these 4 events and put them in order from beginning to end. Sometimes they will have some of them filled in, and they just need to put 1 event. Sometimes they'll have to put a couple of events. This particular one, they were given 4 events. One student, I had to laugh when we were taking this. I said very specifically they only need to write the letter because there was no way that they would be able to fit the whole thing in. And one student decided that she was going to rewrite the whole thing in there. She had the sequence correct, so I wasn't too angry about that. But I was like, did you read the directions? And I said, did you read the directions? And she said, yeah. And I said, what is this direction? She's like, you only need to put the, oh. And she did have the sequence correct, which was all. So some other ways that they're going to ask this is, what did the person do before or after he did something? What happened immediately? Immediately is going to be an important word there. Which event happened first or last? So those are going to be the important things. Next slide, please.
I knew it could be all over the page.
So I'm not going to reread. I'm just going to point things out specifically here. You can reread this passage. This was actually a format. In this one, I gave them 2 events, and they had to find the 3rd event. So which statement would fit in the empty box? Matt painted the floors, walls, painted the flying dust, and then they had to fill in that box. And we saw overall, the majority did very well, 73%. Not the majority of the class did choose that. So if we look at this, he realized it was that happens well before all of these things. He painted there. That happens. He paints the branch before this all happens. The teacher gave him an assignment that identified that all 3 events happened well before. They had to especially attend to the direction of the arrow. So just something students have screwed up in practice before. And he painted himself in the picture, so we see floors, walls, and lamp. And then up here we see fleck of dust and fly. That he sees that thing. So that one was a little bit easier. The 3 events happened before. He picked something that had happened after. All right, so this one, 6 questions, but not quite as well as that last example we had seen. And does anybody see the clue word in this one? It says, what happens immediately before Susanna notices the green spot in her backyard? What should the students have picked up on in this? There's a very specific word that they needed to pick up. Immediately. It says immediately. So what they had to do was they had to find the green spot. And it says green spot right there. So the thing that is she was about to rinse her mug. About a little over half the class got that. What happened immediately after was she pressed her face up against the kitchen window. About a third of the class picked what happened immediately after. So they did pick up on the immediately part, didn't pick up on the before-after part. And she puts on her bathing suit. That happens all the way down here. So while all of those, I was impressed that they did pick up, the people who did pick up on before, because A and B were things that happened before that event, C and D happened after. Her parents packed the car and leave. That happened earlier in the story. If I had the whole thing that happened about right up there. So they had, that happened before. So the big bigger concerning thing is that people picked up on about a third of the class, well, over a third of the class picked up on things that had happened after this green spot. So every student knows the difference between before and after, by and large. So that's more of just not reading carefully mistake. All right, so this one only a third of the class got correct. The reason this one was because this one focuses on years. The students had to understand the Chinese Exclusion Act, something happened, and then the limiting laws ended. This was from a nonfiction piece, and they had to identify that while they were reading this, the things that happened in order by year didn't necessarily follow narratively in there, which is, again, something you're going to see on the SOL, so it's just helping to prepare them. So the Chinese Exclusion Act was in 1882, and if I were to taking this, and this is something that you can help your students with, I would write 1882 under it. And then limiting laws ended and where is it? 1965, so I would write it in there. So I'd be looking for an event that happened between 1875 and 1965. So the first colonists arrived, that happened 1607, depending which colonists they were speaking of. California Gold Rush, that happened before the Chinese Exclusion Act. Great Depression, while Great Depression is down here, it talks about the Great Depression happening in 1900. Is that what it says? Mrs. Burke?
1930.
1930. So 1930 is in between those, but it does come after when it actually says limiting laws ended. So that's really what threw them off. And while that is kind of a hard thing to understand, the SOL is going to do that. And fourth wave of immigration happened. That was the very last thing. The fourth wave of immigration was like 50 years ago, or less than 50 years ago. So that's things dealing with years are going to be a little bit more tricky because they're going to have to read a little bit more critically than thinking about just the events in the story. Luckily, they're not going to see a whole ton of questions like that, but they will see those kind of questions. Next one. Again, ways to practice sequencing. When you're reading with your child, just ask them to tell certain parts. A lot of times in guided reading, if sequencing is a skill that I'm working on, for instance, this week happened to be a sequencing week, I would say that in the one groups, they were talking about how to save seals from oil spills. And I said that there are 9 to save seals from oil spills. Give me 5 of them, any 5, as long as they're in order. So they would look back, and for the most part, they would get them in the correct order. If they didn't, I told them to go back and find which one they had out of place. You want to ask them specifically which event happened first or last, rather than having them put the list. Say, what happened first? Like in the example of the oil spill, I said, what happened first? And they said they had to catch the seals. And then I would say, what happened last? And they said they released the seals. So that was a basic example. But you can do that anything, fiction, nonfiction, newspaper. I mean, newspapers can be really great. And then another thing you can do is give them 2 specific events and tell them what happened in between. So going back to my seal example, what I would say, what happened between them catching the seals and cleaning the seals off. And they had to go back and find that they had to give them like a tranquilizer because apparently a seal that has oil in it doesn't like being cleaned. So that they had to go find that what happened in between those. If they get the sequence wrong, you need to have them go back and find that. Because, again, encourage them to reread that. If you take anything out of this evening, always have them go back and reread things. And another really easy way to do this is just highlight. Sequence is something that's going to impact them every day. They wake up, they eat their teeth, or they brush their teeth, brush your teeth. You get dressed, I might have one. But you tell them, like, just kind of highlight there and then have them kind of relate those things. That's step by step. Other good thing, if any of your students cook, you have to follow those things in specific orders. That's the one thing that they're going to see on the SOL. They're going to see a recipe or directions for a craft or something. They're going to ask what happens after you take the string to the balloon or something. So really, directions, recipes, cleansing with. All right, making inferences is our third and final topic for tonight. And this is one that you might not making an inference specifically, but you've done it at some point in your life, I guarantee. So it was decided to have Mrs. Burke come over and help me figure out how to really word an inference, because inference is somewhere between. I tell the kids they have to think of themselves as the detective. It's kind of like a prediction, kind of thinking beyond the text. So what we came up with was that the author will not explicitly say in the text what they mean. The students have to use what's given in the text along with their own thinking beyond the text and determine what it might be implied. And that's kind of a confusing definition. The best way that I can put it is an activity I do with the students, which I'm going to explain at the end, is all am, and they have to use their background knowledge in addition to what I said to clue in on where I am. We're going to go through some examples like I have with the other two that might help to kind of put in perspective what an inference is. It's hard to define an inference without an actual example. Oh, and common mistakes, looking at just certain parts, kind of like main idea for the inferencing. When we get to the inferencing questions, I'll kind of show you, or not looking back. Those are two different things. All right, so inferences are going to be worded in a couple of different ways. Most basic, another way that they're going to have whatever, and that's one that they're going to have to go back to that paragraph. What can you tell about blah, blah, blah? And the one that they're going to see probably more, this character most likely feels or will do next. So they're going to say, like, Johnny was crying. He put his head down on his pillow. How does he most likely feel? Obviously, yeah, actually sad. Author never comes out and says that would happen. Or if they say, like, story I was just working on with a student the other day, they were worried to get money because in the beginning of the story book, and then it said at the end, what will they most likely do next? So they had gotten the paper route, amongst us was go get the book, and that's what they got started. So most likely they had gotten money, they were going to go get the book. This is actually, these two questions, these are actually from the very, very, very first reading quiz we ever took. So we see this is kind of where it gets better from there. In this one, the passage says that Andreas says to Tyrell, playing on the basketball team wouldn't be any fun without you. When Tyrell finds out that both he and Andreas made the team, he tells Andreas, we made it with a happy voice. So what conclusion does this information best support? The correct answer is that it's Tyrell that they make the team together. Clues that tell us that his happy voice, the fact that he says that it wouldn't be without you. Nowhere in the passage does it say, like, Andreas says to Tyrell, it's really important that we make the team together. You kind of have to put the clues together. The common mistake here was that they would play basketball better. While that is a reasonable claim, or to support the first answer, then what I tell students is, generally speaking, with multiple choice questions, there's going to be two bad answers, a good answer, and a bad question. That's the best answer, or reverse that. That's the good answer, and that's because while they might play better, because they if they would have talked about them getting better with each other in the whole passage, that would support that. Nothing in the passage talks about that. The passage is mainly about their friendship and why it's important to be together. It's kind of hard just from this isolated thing without the whole passage to kind of support with the basketball sprinkled in. This he loved the feeling in his hands, fell to the net, swish. Andreas thought it was the best sound in the world. Why might Andreas think this is the best sound in the world? So this was pretty evenly split, about 2/3 picked the correct answer, 1/3 did not. So the class knew enough about basketball that swish generally means that it went in the net, and they also knew that they wouldn't be happy if the other team scored. But some people thought that it made a pleasant sound. Swish, yeah, it might be a pleasant sound, but most likely the reason that he's happy is because he just hit. They had to kind of pull from background knowledge about basketball, which that's going to be one thing. If your student doesn't have the requisite background here, every student will have read books, short little books on different information. So it's going to give them a wide background they have that background information. I can't really teach them about everything in the world. I'd love to. But possible that those people who chose B didn't know that it meant he scored a basket. I mean, it's very possible. They just think it's a correct answer, but they had to kind of think why Andreas. They had to kind of put themselves in Andreas' shoes. Next one. This was a good question. On reading quizzes, they're going to have short responses versus multiple choice. And this was an inference question, so I'll read this whole paragraph because it's kind of important question. A little background on this paragraph is the boy, Daniel, is constantly getting in trouble with his father because he's always making messes and his sister's like the golden child of the family. And then we find out in the passage that Daniel's not really that bad of a kid and his sister is actually a bad kid, but is just very good at gaming the system. So it says, I got out, Miranda didn't for a moment, wondering why she was just sitting there. Then I saw Oatmeal, who was the cat, squeeze his way out of her bag, and they're on their way to school. Despite her struggle to keep him contained. I slammed the door shut so he wouldn't escape. I heard her shriek and my dad yell while I watched the car tear the leather as he clawed his way out of the passenger seat. Miranda, Dad's scream was all the doors closed. I could hear them arguing, and then Dad waved at me without looking and drove away. I probably should have just felt a little angry that Miranda got late to school, or that my dad drove away like that. But I walked into the building, and I could just not stop smiling. So this was a short response, which meant I could accept a variety of answers. What I was looking for was that he was happy that his sister got in trouble. Nowhere in here does it say that he's happy that his sister got in trouble, but you have to kind of think about how he would feel. Overall, he's mad that he's mad that Oatmeal, who's the cat, Daniel's getting blamed for. He's mad that Miranda is doing this. So the student had to have something along that line. He's happy about his sister getting in trouble. So as we can see very well, 82% of the class hit. The 18 who didn't, some people had something that he was happy to see Oatmeal, he was happy to go to school, which kind of makes sense. It's talking about Oatmeal school, kind of reasonable assumptions, but not the best assumption. Whereas the author's trying to lead us to believe that that Daniel is happy because his sister's getting in trouble, and I would be too. Next one.
On the SOLs, are they all multiple choice?
They're not necessarily going to have a variety of different ones. As we get closer to the SOLs, well, for these kind of notes I'll go through, they have what are called technology enhanced items, or more drag and drop, and they can pick more than one. The majority, I probably about 65 enhanced.
When they get used to rereading, when they read on the SOL.
Yep, they can take as long as they want. I had a student last year take, how long did he take? 6 hours or something. We were very close to having to call his parents to see if he could stay after school for lunch, and they can take as long as they want. And that student, he's one of my favorite success stories from last year because he came in from 3rd grade. He had not passed his 3rd grade SOL. He was remediation groups, worked very hard. He was not a very good natural reader, but he put in the effort. I mean, that kid worked so hard, and he took the 6 hours on the test. He had the 3rd highest score in my class last year. So versus some students, natural readers, thought they could fly through it. I won 5 minutes. Bombed it. There were 9 stories on the SOL last year. To get through that in 35 minutes, that's ridiculous. You're spending that. You can't even read the story in 4 minutes. I mean, I stood behind her and I watched her, and when it said to go back to paragraphs, she didn't. To say the least, I was not happy with her. Not because she failed. I was not happy she didn't put the effort. On the flip side, I had students who put in a lot, didn't pass, but I was okay with that because they did their best. I had some students who came from 3rd grade, got, I don't think below basic is low, got basic, but made a huge gap, and I was okay with that because they made a lot of growth. What I look for is more growth than the actual cut and dry. They pass the fail. But yeah, the majority I would say are going to be multiple choice. They're going to have some of the technology enhanced questions.
But they are aware of that with these that they can have that. Because usually, like we said with banners, they were just trying to get the test done just as fast as they could so they could move to the next banner.
Yeah, no, well, I don't do the banners here for that exact reason because I don't promote speed when reading. But yeah, even these reading quizzes, some students will start them on Friday and finish them on Monday. And I tell them that they can have as long as they like. There's no, obviously, if they're going to take 4 days, I have to kind of say at some point, I need to scan that because the next day. But yeah, they like for these quizzes, they will have as long as they'd like for this one. So this one, what inference could be made about 11? This was paragraph 11. Farmer slipped on his overalls and laced up his boots and put on a broad, round-rimmed leather hat. He combed down his bristly beard to a ponytail and walked out the door. Like, it doesn't say anywhere he cares about his look. He does not cares about it. It doesn't say that explicitly anywhere in the text. The students picked up on that had to do something about the parents because a third picked about that he cares about his parents, which is the correct answer because, I mean, you're not going to, the farmer's alone in the story. If you don't care about your parents, especially when you're living alone, I can attest this because I live alone, you're not going to take the time to make yourself dress up, look nice just to go check on your chickens. So some people were able to pick on that. Some people picked up on how they didn't pick up on that had to do with the looks, did pick up that they thought that he didn't care. That was kind of one hard for me to figure out why they might think that. The only thing that I could put is that the way that they're describing him, bristly beard and long stringy hair, doesn't really paint the best case, taking the time to say that he could look nice, hold it back, tried to make it nice, laced up his boots. So they might have picked up on just the small details, but overall, it does show that he cares about his parents. All right, so ways to practice this is while you're reading with your child, just ask them how they think the character is feeling. Now, this is only going to work if it doesn't say it directly in the passage. So if it says, like, Johnny's feeling sad, don't turn around and ask, how is Johnny feeling? Because that's a very literal question. Hopefully, they would be able to get that. If they wouldn't be able to get that, then that's a whole other skill we need to work on. But if it gives them clues of how they might feel, ask them that. And then also ask them what details show that. That's just as important as being able to get the correct answer. If they give you a detail, like that maybe they say, Johnny feels happy, and that's completely out of left field. Ask them why they give you a clue into their thought process of why they might think that. Also have them predict where they're going by using clues. I didn't have an example, but one example that I can think of from my student teaching was they were talking about kids getting in the city and going bus, and they were heading to somewhere with water, and they had to figure out where they were going. Obviously, the beach. This is something that students absolutely love. That they practically beg me to do it. I come up with a scenario, and I have them guess where I am or what I'm doing. So, for an example, I'll say I'm high up in the mountains. I have a hat, goggles, and gloves on because it's cold. The wind is whipping in my face as I go down the mountain. I have 2 things strapped to my feet. What am I doing? So, what am I doing?
Skiing.
Skiing, obviously. That was one I used specifically. It was skiing. Some people said snowboarding, but there's something in this that makes. Can anyone pick out what makes?
2.
Yeah, I'd say 2 things. So I said 2 things. While they picked up on mountain, it's snowing. They need to pick up on all the things. So they pick up on some things, but not all the things. So you can do that with anything. I mean, you can really personalize it for your child a lot if you have traditions or anything. Or I believe Farron was telling me about on Thanksgiving. This is good. So you could say, I'm getting out. What are we going to do? She can use her background knowledge and that and put it together and realize this will to your child better than I can because I know all 22 of them pretty well. I don't know them as well as you do. So that's one way. And then another way that we would do the scenario thing is I would act it out. They thought the door, and I'd slam the door down, all sorts of things. And I'd be like, how am I feeling? And they said, Matt, how did you know? You slammed the door, you slammed your iPad down, you kicked a child across the room, that kind of stuff. So you can do that with them. They enjoyed that. I think they actually enjoyed that one better than this one. This one's a little bit easier to do because you have a lot wide range. There's only so many emotions that you can act out and so many kids you can kick across the room before Mrs. Waters going to come down and start asking questions. So now we can eat this last slide. All right, so the last thing we have, and actually, go on time. Do you guys have any questions of any sort? This is, obviously, we're going to have multiple of these between now and the SOL. This is just covering these skills. That one will cover more skills. So any questions, speak now or forever hold your peace.
If you had any more examples of inference.
The best thing you can do is go on Google and just Google inference 4th grade examples. That's actually how I got that scenario, is I Googled 4th grade passages, or inference 4th grade, and I came up with that. So I really do appreciate you coming in tonight. You guys are gonna really make the difference. I like to think of a child's education in 3 parts. The child's working hard, ton of people working hard. It's really going to make the difference. Like I said, with my graduate program, it shows a lot of research to support, and you can really tailor things to them. Like I was saying with the inferencing thing, it's going to make it as best for them. And the other, getting reinforcement in this, the stuff for 7 hours a day while they're with me, and they're getting about an hour of math, about 2 hours of reading, an hour of social studies, and 2 hours of reading a day. If that's all the reading they do, that's great, but they need to continue that at home because that's really going to make the difference. We're going to be taking the reading, actually going to be taking that tomorrow in place of their normal reading quiz. It needs to be done by this week, and with all the snow days, we're working on these skills in class a lot. So if you have any time, I know it's a little bit late, a couple minutes when you get home with your child or sometime in the morning to work on this, it's going to really help them. If you could, the very last page in the back of the pre-survey is the back of this. It's the one that looks like this, the feedback survey. If you could just complete that, and also if you haven't gotten a chance to do start survey, that's just going to help me once. There's a white basket on your way out. Just feel free to, it's all one page, so you can just throw it in there. We're seeing you guys on Tuesday for the math night. The math night, well, this was a lot of me kind of giving you information. The math night is going to be more me modeling different ways. Like I know a lot of parents have had questions about how to do all of those kind of things. I'm going to actually, on the smart board, some opportunities for you guys to practice that. Because some math, I would really love to see all of you and more back at the math night. I think the math night is going to be very, very helpful, especially because that's going to start and last time we're going to teach you about. I'm going to review division with you because that's what we're going to be starting next. So that'll give you a leg up on your student, and so then that'll kind of get your student, me, and you all on the same page because. How to spot you guys, it makes sense, and I'll explain why it makes sense. So I really appreciate you coming out. If you don't have any questions, put it down over there. And all of you on YouTube, I will see you on Tuesday.